The history of Karuizawa is actually really fascinating. So Japanese whiskey has been historically dominated by the company I work for, by Suntory, and they were famous for producing blended whiskies, and many competitors arose in the 30s to 50s, including Ocean Sanraku. One of their products, one of their distilleries was of course Karuizawa, and in the 1970s, the world of whiskey was changing and they released the first ever Japanese single malt. And unfortunately, whilst it didn't work out too well at the time, the style they were making of Golden Promise barley with rich sherried flavors is incredibly popular now. So despite the fact that the distillery is closed, because that liquid still exists, because it's so rare, because it's so different, it's incredibly collectible. Two main things make a specific bottle collectible. Firstly, its rarity, because it's a limited edition or because it's closed distillery, and secondly, its presentation. And Karuizawa really ticks both of those boxes. It's a closed distillery that has an incredible reputation historically, and the repackaging that people have done over the last few years give it this absolute beauty. One of the reasons that Japanese whiskey is so rare now is that in the 80s and 90s, and even some of the noughties, the world stopped drinking whiskey. And that meant that many Japanese distilleries either lowered their production or just closed completely. Suddenly then, in the noughties and the teenies, everyone starts drinking whiskey again. There's a boom globally for Scotch, for American, for Irish, and indeed for Japanese. One really interesting thing is the fact that many of the original producers of Japanese whiskey intended to make whiskey for the everyman. It's part of Shinjiro Tori's original dream. But in the end, it goes to auction and it achieves incredible prices. Between Karuizawa and Yamazaki, you have two of the most collectible and expensive secondary market whiskeys in the entire world. As a Japanese whiskey lover, tasting one of these whiskeys that's incredibly rare or exclusive is a properly magical experience. It's so hard to describe really what that feels like, but it's kind of a realization of so many emotions at the same time. You're realizing that you're tasting something that is truly complex, that has decades in a cask, where it's developed all these tertiary notes that just don't exist in younger whiskeys. This is really a moment of history. This is a snapshot. It's like seeing a photograph of something that no longer exists. And it brings to mind that concept of mono no aware in Japanese culture, that everything is transient, nothing lasts forever, but there's a real beauty in experiencing and enjoying that special moment.